The official story actually states that a plane came in at an approximate 45-degree angle, and that its wing hit here, and that it went in basically here into the building, versus, as you'll see, because from window to window is 10 feet, according to the Pentagon Building Performance Report. So it's approximately, count the windows, at least 100 feet between the official story says the plane allegedly impacted and where, as we're going to see, there actually was a plane that was destroyed at the Pentagon, which was considerably to the left or the north of where the official story claims it happened. This is a properly scaled and positioned Boeing 757, actually positioned in, of course, it's an overlay, but it's positioned the way the official story claims that Flight 77 came in, which shows the complete and total absurdity of it. If the official story were true, those huge engines would have gouged the lawn like this. And it's very important that the official story claims that the plane came in effectively level, not at an angle, which would have avoided this. Instead, the lawn outside the official story alleged impact point, this is a very famous photograph that almost everyone in the 9/11 truth movement has wrongly used as evidence that no plane was destroyed at the Pentagon, that you're going to see the damage that I'm about to show you the photographs of is just to the right of that little the firehouse building with the heliport air traffic controls lookout above it. That's what you're about to see. That's just one example. The lawn off Wedge 2 is anything but pristine. The Pentagon firehouse in this photograph, you can see the top of the firehouse just beyond that fire engine, and that's that firehouse that you saw in the previous photograph. 2 heliport firefighters who were on duty in that little firehouse that morning of 9/11, because, most people don't know this, President Bush, before the attacks, was pre-scheduled to arrive by helicopter at the Pentagon heliport around noon, between noon and 12:30. So they were getting ready for that, and he had, just before what I'm about to show you happened, the firefighter Alan Wallace had backed that fire truck out of the firehouse and parked it with its back to the wall, perpendicular to the wall. All of this is to the left or the north of the line demarcating Wedge 1 to Wedge 2. Pentagon heliport firefighters, as we've already seen, their names are Alan Wallace and Mark Skipper, are direct witnesses to a white plane approaching the heliport and exploding into a massive fireball near the firehouse, which would have killed them had they not noticed it at the last second and literally run. One of them, Alan Wallace, ran away as he saw it coming in. He thought maybe 200 and 250 feet from him, which is difficult to estimate because it's coming right at him, to his left. As he walked with his back out from behind by that fire truck, he was very clear that he looked to his left, and it was coming right at him at that diagonal angle. And it would have killed him had he not immediately run out of the way to save his life and rolled under a van that was, you'll see that van in a moment, that was parked outside the wall of the heliport firehouse. And Mark Skipper, the other firefighter, ran out onto the lawn to the north or to the left and literally leapt away. And they did survive. They were burned, but they survived. I believe, though this is an inference, he did state explicitly that he believed, Alan Wallace, that the plane, which was coming in at an angle, so he saw the right side of the plane on his left, that there was 2 stripes down the side. He thought they were orange and blue, but they were almost certainly orange-red or red and blue in order to simulate an American airliner. To avoid being hit by this white plane, heliport firefighter Alan Wallace ran toward the outer wall of the heliport and leapt for cover under a van. And this is his published testimony. After coming out, immediately after, he said, quote, "Everything is on fire. The grass is on fire. The building is on fire. The firehouse is on fire. There was fire everywhere. Areas of the blacktop, meaning the helipad, were on fire. There was debris everywhere. The trees were on fire. The back end of the fire truck that he and Mark Skipper had just parked facing away from the Pentagon wall was also in flames. Inside the firehouse, the ceiling had crumbled, temporarily trapping the third firefighter, Dennis Young, and was filled also with debris. The official Pentagon report, called Pentagon 9/11, actually states that the fireball may have even gone into the still open firehouse door, out of which Wallace had just backed out the fire truck, or moved the fire truck out. Multiple witnesses saw the plane's, this white plane's left wing hit, scrape, or drag on the helipad just before it burst into a fireball. These are just some of the testimonies. Quote, "The left wing of the plane touched the ground by the helicopter pad. The left wing dipped and scraped the helicopter area. The left wing touched the helipad." These are all separate witnesses. "The plane dragged its left wing along the ground. It looked like it hit the helicopter pad, then skipped up. The plane caught an edge of its left wing on the ground. There is a helicopter pad right in front of the side of the Pentagon. The left wing touched there." After the fireball, there was suddenly what one witness called literally millions of small pieces of debris, which I think that the evidence shows is this wreckage of this plane, pieces at and around the Pentagon heliport. Now, this is anything but a pristine lawn. This is also well to the north, between 120 and 150 feet north or to the left of the alleged impact point of Flight 77, further south. The debris, according to witnesses, also rained onto I-27, which is to the right, perpendicular to the wall, out, with some even, according to witnesses, falling on the north side of the Pentagon and on the Fort Myer walking trail. This is completely different from the official account. One of the witnesses, Penny Eglis, claimed that she also saw a white, she was very certain, white, low-flying, approaching plane, the above piece from which, she said, actually fell through her car's sunroof. The inside surface of this piece of evidence is dark red, which is nothing at all like the light green on the inner surface of the body of civilian airliners like American Airlines 757s. It looks like a kind of graphite material, which may actually be similar or identical to the material used to stealth military planes. 9/11, in my very educated opinion, was not just an evil inside plot, it was a diabolical inside plot, whose purpose was, in my opinion, to terrorize the United States into putting Israel's interest above our own. I call that treason. To get the United States military into the Middle East, as Nicholas Rockefeller told Rousseau a year before 9/11. This was a long-time goal of the Project for New American Century U.S. and Israeli Zionists, to effect Israel's goals using American blood and treasure, which is still happening. CENTCOM, which stands for Central Command, the Central Combatant Command of the United States military of the Pentagon, had already, before 9/11, been moved to the Middle East. You would think that CENTCOM would be centered over the United States. Well, one of the reasons for that is, as you have already learned, there was no combatant command over the mainland United States until immediately after 9/11, when they created NORTHCOM for that very purpose. Reported dual Israeli-U.S. citizen Paul Wolfowitz was Deputy Secretary of Defense, number 2 immediately under Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. Richard Pearl, reported dual U.S.-Israeli citizen, proclaimed himself one of the top Project for New American Century Manifesto signatories. He self-proclaimed himself the Prince of Darkness. And he chaired Rumsfeld's Defense Policy Board. If Richard Pearl is the Prince of Darkness, Dov Zakheim is the king. Dov Zakheim is a rabbi and reported dual U.S.-Israeli citizen. He wrote a paper advocating a staged catastrophic event to force the United States into war to reconfigure the Middle East in Israel's interest, and presented it to the Project for New American Century before they wrote the Project for New American Century Manifesto. And Zakheim is credited with the actual New Pearl Harbor quote in that manifesto. Zakheim headed all of the Pentagon's accounts as its DoD comptroller under Rumsfeld, as the $2.3 trillion was announced being missing the day before 9/11 on September 10th. CIA whistleblower Susan Lindauer says it was really $9.1 trillion and that it had gone for Israel. Pentagon auditors tracking the missing money, killed on 9/11 by inside explosives in the Pentagon, and the records were destroyed. Zackheim was the chief executive officer of Systems Planning Corporation, a defense contractor that specialized in remote control of airplanes, especially drone aircraft, used in U.S. military exercises, and a special system which destroyed them in their terminal phases. This is what the evidence shows actually happened at the Pentagon on 9/11. Systems Planning Corporation had a subsidiary that actually oversaw the 1993 World Trade Center 1 attack, so-called investigation, and through that investigation obtained the secret World Trade Center blueprints, which were needed to know where to plant controlled demolition explosives throughout the building. Dov Zackheim arranged for the Pentagon to receive leased converted Boeing 767 fuel tanker planes, which are consistent with what eyewitnesses saw of the plane that actually struck World Trade Center 2 on 9/11. Reported dual Israeli-U.S. citizen Philip Zelikow headed the 9/11 Commission cover-up as its executive director. Reported dual U.S. Israeli citizen Michael Chertoff headed the Department of Justice alleged, quote, investigation, which is a cover-up of 9/11, and became the second new Department of Homeland Security director. So we must ask, whose homeland and whose security? The 9/11 neocons' mentor's mentor, therefore, was Hitler's own justifier of evil, Nazi Carl Schmitt. This is a quote from Professor Francis Boyle, an internationally renowned professor of international law at the University of Illinois. Quote, Schmitt was the most notorious Nazi law professor of his day, justifying every atrocity the Nazis inflicted on everyone. We're talking about the Holocaust. We must understand that these so-called neoconservatives are in fact neo-Nazis. They espouse the Nazi doctrine of Schmitt and Strauss and Machiavelli and Nietzsche, the doctrine of the Superman, unquote. This is what internationally acclaimed journalist Seymour Hersh had to say. Quote, we, that is the United States, has been taken over basically by a cult. 8 or 9 neoconservatives, we've seen they're really neo-Nazis in their mentality, have somehow grabbed the U.S. government. Just how and why they did it so efficiently, we'll have to wait for much later historians and for better documentation than we have now. But they managed to overcome the federal bureaucracy and the Congress and the press with the greatest of ease. This does say something about how fragile our democracy is, unquote. Lawrence Wilkerson, who was Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell in the Bush-Cheney administration, about this same coup said, it's not a coup, it's worse. This is how retired 4-star U.S. Army General and top NATO commander Wesley Clark put it in a 2003 public address at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco.
What happened in 9/11 is we didn't have a strategy, we didn't have bipartisan agreement, we didn't have American understanding of it, and we had instead a policy coup in this country. A coup. A policy coup. Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. Then I came back to the Pentagon about 6 weeks later. I saw the same officer. I said, why haven't we attacked Iraq? We still going to attack Iraq? He said, oh, sir. He says, it's worse than that. He said, he pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. I sat on this information for a long time, for about 6 or 8 months. I was so stunned by this I couldn't begin to talk about it. And I couldn't believe it would really be true, but that's actually what happened. These people took control of the policy in the United States. And I realized then, it came back to me, a 1991 meeting I had with Paul Wolfowitz. You know, in 2001 he was Deputy Secretary of Defense, but in 1991 he was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. It's the #3 position in the Pentagon. It was a pretty stunning thing. You mean the purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments? It's not to sort of deter conflict? We're going to invade countries? And you know, my mind was spinning. And I put that aside. It was like a nugget that you hold on to. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. It went back to those comments in 1991. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't.
The truth is, our government was and still is penetrated and controlled by a Zionist Israeli fifth column that took over the White House, the Congress, the military-civilian superstructure, key military officers and intelligence personnel, and the mainstream media leading up to, on, and after 9/11. The level and extent of this penetration is unprecedented in the history of the world and amounts to a literal invasion by an un-American and hostile force. The same year, 2003, that General Wesley Clark gave that warning that the United States government, civilian superstructure of the military, key military officers and special operators and intelligence personnel had been taken over by an Israeli neocon fifth column coup, Israel's own Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, frustrated that his Middle East destabilization and domination plan wasn't going as well and as quickly as planned, declared that the United States had already conquered Iraq. Remember Bush's famous false and absurd premature mission accomplished speech from the deck of a Navy ship that same year, 2003? Ariel Sharon went on that it was time that the U.S. marched against Libya, Syria, and Iran. Note that President Obama has made Sharon's Libya demand already a reality, that the U.S. is now destabilizing Syria by supporting none other than al-Qaeda-affiliated Syrian so-called rebels, and that the war drums are building now for an attack on Iran. I do not believe it is a coincidence that the same lead actor who played in the movie Pearl Harbor, Ben Affleck, that prepared the ground for the American public to accept the, quote, new Pearl Harbor, unquote, meme for the inside job 9/11 attacks, just happens to be the producer, director, and leading actor of the new movie Argo, a transparent piece of Hollywood CIA propaganda which is intended to demonize Iran and prepare the American public to now accept a war against that final nation in the neocons' quickly falling row of Middle East dominoes. Facts alone are not enough. Our 9/11 truth movement, I believe, needs to become the heart and soul, maybe the main impetus of a global truth force movement. And Mahatma Gandhi actually initiated precisely such a movement in India, which he called Truth Force, or Satyagraha, on, coincidentally, September 11th.